Volodymyr Zelenskyy has urged world leaders to back his country in the search for a real and just peace. The Ukrainian President was addressing the UN General Assembly and warned them that Russian President Vladimir Putin had decided that he can do whatever he likes. Ukraine's heading for its third winter at war following Russia's full-scale invasion. And Zelenskyy is expected at the White House this week to present his plan for victory over Russia. Full details haven't yet been revealed, but he used today's speech to reiterate Ukraine's minimum terms for peace.
We must restore nuclear safety. Energy must stop being used as a weapon. We must ensure food security. We need to bring home all our captured soldiers and civilians possibly deported to Russia. We must uphold the UN Charter and guarantee our right, Ukraine's right to territorial integrity and sovereignty, just as we do for any other nation. We need to withdraw the Russian occupiers, which will bring an end to the hostilities in Ukraine, and we must hold those responsible for war crimes accountable. We need to prevent ecocide and stop the destruction of nature caused by the war. And we must not allow a second or third phase of this Russian invasion. And we need to make it clear the war is over. This is the peace formula. What part of this could be unacceptable to anyone who upholds the UN Charter?
Let's bring in Yevheniia Kravchuk, a Ukrainian MP with Volodymyr Zelenskyy's Servant of the People Party. She joins us from Kyiv. Welcome to DW. Just before we are speaking now, we heard from President Zelenskyy. We heard him outline his conditions for peace. What do you know about the president's so-called victory plan, which he'll be putting to President Biden and Vice President Harris tomorrow?
Well, of course, it's about a larger aid to Ukraine, faster aid, because we are sort of late with getting all of the promised equipments and ammunition for Ukraine, but also its security guarantees of non-repetition, because, we are in this region bordering with Russia. So if the world does not want to face another full-fledged conflict in the area, we have to find a solution for security guarantees for Ukraine. And of course, it's again underlining the peace formula of President Zelenskyy. And probably you heard his speech today in General Assembly in United Nations, underlining all of the points of the peace formula, and they are in line with United Nations Charter and world order and internationally recognized borders of the countries.
And is there a time frame for President Zelenskyy's victory plan? Because you don't have that much time before the US administration changes.
Well, for sure. I mean, Ukraine is the country that wants the end of the war most of all countries, because that's our people dying, our people being in the attacks every day and being hostages and war prisoners in Russian prisons. So basically, President Zelenskyy underlined that most of the decision could be taken between October and the beginning of next year or the end of this year. So basically pointing out that this administration, Biden administration, can take these steps.
But here's the thing that we learned today. President Putin warned that Russia could use its nuclear weapons if it was struck with conventional missiles. And he's gone on to say that Moscow would consider any assault on it that was supported by a nuclear power to be a joint attack. Now, that's presumably going to be very much on the mind of President Biden when President Zelenskyy is outlining this plan.
It's another blackmailing from Putin and Kremlin. Right now, Ukrainian troops are on the Kursk region, on the soil of Russian Federation. And, they are fulfilling the operational targets, and they are there. And this operation is going to be continued. I don't know how else Ukraine can signal that you do not have to fear these red lines from Kremlin.
Expand on that, because yes, it's blackmail, but why shouldn't the West take it seriously?
We've been talking a lot about this, also the peace formula of China and Brazil. And of course, Ukraine is not supporting all these points. But, some of these points are very interesting, because China is saying directly that there should not be a use of nuclear or chemical weapons, but also there should not be attacks on the nuclear power plants. By the way, President Zelenskyy addressed that during the speech in General Assembly. He said that Russia is trying to attack or planning to attack nuclear power plants in Ukraine, and we could be facing another Chernobyl, the biggest nuclear catastrophe in this region.
Those are elements of a plan that President Zelenskyy has said he wants nothing to do with. So that still leaves us with this Russian blackmail threat that if a nuclear power joins Ukraine in attacking it, it will consider that to be a joint attack. So again, let me press you on this. Why shouldn't the West, that sounds like a very serious threat, why shouldn't the West take that very, very seriously?
Does the West want to live in the world with no rules and agreeing with everything that Russia says, everything that North Korea says, everything that Iran says? But does West have a power and, the solidarity among the countries to defend the world order, the sovereign states, and stand against the blackmailing? Or our world will go to jeopardy and listen again to the blackmailing of the state that claimed that will invade Ukraine in 3 days or 2 weeks.
Ukraine's latest unfulfilled wish from its allies is for permission to use long-range weapons to strike deeper into Russia. What happens if the answer remains no?
We'll do our weapons ourselves. Of course, we rely on our partners. We would like to have this aid because, we need these long-range weapons to attack the military targets, the airports where the planes take off and send guided bombs to Ukrainian cities, killing civilians, killing children. But of course, Ukraine is also developing its own weapons and will be targeting military targets inside in the land of Russia by ourselves, of course. But we do not want to feel that we are alone in this fight for freedom and democracy.
And finally, as I've mentioned, the new year will bring a new US president. I want to play you one of the candidates talking about the war going on in your country.
Biden and Kamala got us into this war in Ukraine, and now they can't get us out. They can't get us out. I watched him. We will win. We will. He's been saying that for 3 years. Every time Zelenskyy comes to the United States, he walks away with $100 billion. I think he's the greatest salesman on earth. But we're stuck in that war unless I'm president. I'll get it done. I'll get it negotiated. I'll get out. We got to get out.
Yevheniia Kravchuk, do you believe that a Trump presidency will get the United States out of the war in your country on terms that will be acceptable to Ukraine?
I'm Ukrainian citizen. I'm not a voter in president elections in the United States, and I should not intervene in it. But the only comment I have on this segment is this phrase about Zelensky being the greatest salesman of all the times in getting the money and everything. But, what is he selling? Why is he asking for the support? What is he selling, the tears of the Ukrainian children, or tears of Ukrainian widows, or deaths of Ukrainian soldiers? He's not asking money for himself. We are a nation at war. Every person in Ukraine is influenced by this war. They have people that perished in the battle. They have friends that had to flee the occupied territories. Zelensky is asking for a country, for a nation, for people.
Thank you very much.
Good talking to you. Thank you so much for sparing us the time. Yevheniia Kravchuk from Volodymyr Zelensky's Servant of the People Party. Thank you so much. And more on the Ukrainian president's speech with Orysia Lutsevych, who's Deputy Director of the Russia and Eurasia Programme and head of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House. Welcome to DW. President Zelensky went to the UN today to sustain global support. How do you think his message resonated amongst, well, not just his partners, but with the wider world?
From early days of Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, President Zelensky and his team and Ukrainian diplomats really tried to use UN stage, UN General Assembly to raise, alarms about what is happening with this aggression. You remember the early days in March of 2022, there were resolutions condemning actually this aggression at the UN General Assembly, and so many meetings at the UN Security Council. He basically says Russia violates the fundamental order of the UN Charter, where borders cannot be changed by force, and also appeals, I think, to shared humanity. I think that's why he speaks about nuclear safety. He didn't mention much food security, but that's another thing that touches, millions of people around the world, by the Black Sea being, impeded in its trade routes, and Ukrainian grain cannot reach a lot of markets. Now it's better, but still it's a problem. So I think Ukraine would like to see this war ended respecting international law, not at some kind of middle ground compromise that in the end would embolden the aggressors everywhere and elsewhere.
And when President Zelensky says Russia can only be forced to the negotiating table, is he right?
It's interesting that we are seeing actually no evidence of Russian leadership changing its rhetoric about the goals of why they invaded Ukraine. Putin still keeps insisting on some kind of denazification, imaginary process. Nobody understands what it is. But in the end, he wants to reclaim Ukraine in its control. He feels he needs that buffer zone from NATO, and he wants to destroy independent state of Ukraine, Ukrainian identity. And that is why for Ukraine this war is so existential. And that is why Ukrainian people, despite all the hardships, all the sufferings, keep fighting Russians on the battlefield. And that is why Zelensky is asking for more weapons to actually exploit some of these gains they are having, including in occupying part of Russian territory in Kursk. That is a new dynamic, and something we forget. The war is not really a stalemate. It's quite dynamic on the battlefield. And ahead of winter, each side is preparing for a better position to face winter.
And could I put to you something that we've just learned? So forgive me for blindsiding you like this, but I just want to read you some news that I've just seen. President Putin has warned the West that Russia could use nuclear weapons if it was struck with conventional missiles. And this is the bit. And that Moscow would consider any assault on it supported by a nuclear power to be a joint attack. What do you make of that?
Well, that is a very strong statement. Clearly, Russia has been making statements that include the threat of use of nuclear weapons, again, from almost day 2, I think, of the invasion, when Putin has put strategic nuclear weapons on alert. I think that honestly is like the desperate scream of Russia, because they are losing conventionally, as I said, on the battlefield. They're not making a lot of advances for the man they're losing on Ukrainian soil. So he understands that tomorrow is that important meeting, or actually on Friday is that important meeting between President Biden and President Zelenskyy, when US may take a critical decision to allow long-range strikes against Russian warehouses that are being used to bombard Ukraine. And this is exactly the message to prevent that decision to happen.
Right, that's just a little something for everybody to bear in mind while they're talking about this. Let's talk about this meeting to come between President Zelenskyy and President Biden. Tomorrow they're due to meet, and President Zelenskyy will outline this so-called victory plan. Are we any nearer to knowing what is in President Zelenskyy's victory plan?
Well, in a simplified way, I see this as the war continuation plan, because as President Zelenskyy said, Russia can only be forced to peace rather than willingly sit at the negotiating table. So that plan includes a ask for more military capability. It includes a section on tightening Russian sanctions against Russia so that it cannot rearm, that it cannot supply critical parts for its drones and missiles. It also includes a call for more high technology weapons that Ukraine needs to fight this asymmetric war. When Russia has more manpower, Ukraine needs more technology. And last but not least, it's about investment and economic support. Ukraine is seeking funding to co-produce with the United States and other countries some of the kit that it needs for war. And it also needs budget support to sustain its economy. Zelenskyy is trying to convince Biden to have a common strategy, and that common strategy is about defeating Ukrainian troops on Ukrainian soil, and he's trying to convince him that it's possible.
Good talk to you. Thank you for talking us through that so clearly. Orysia Lutsevych, thank you so much.